Hello and welcome. Today I am going to discuss a poem by William Blake, a famous poet of the second half of 18th century and early 19th century. He was born in 1757 and he passed away in 1827. Therefore, he lived during a turbulent period in history. England was witnessing the beginning of industrial revolution, and the Europe had witnessed the French Revolution of 1789 and the rise of America as an independent state from the colonial rule of England was also taking place during the period. So all these things had a profound impact on the writings of the writers of that time. So there were some writers who were not very much affected by these turbulent incidents of history, and they were busy in writing their satirical writings in heroic couplets for the aristocratic class, or they were busy in imitating the writers of the classical Greek and Latin and imitating their themes, their styles, etc. But there were a group of writers who were conscious to the times, to the history of the period. They were trying to record the unhappiness, the uneasiness, and the whispers of the changing times. These were the writers called precursors of Romanticism. Those who later on heralded the new age, the age of Romantic revival that was to blossom in the early part of the 19th century. We know that the period of the precursors of Romantic revival starts from 1740 and continues till 1798, when lyrical ballads was published by William Wordsworth and Astley Coleridge together. So those aspects of life which were overlooked by the neoclassical writers like Alexander Pope got prominence in the writings of the precursors of Romantic poetry and later on the Romantic poets. Some of the aspects which were highlighted or given importance or brought to prominence by the writers of Romantic school of poetry are imagination, individual freedom, the life of the common man, the sorrow, the suffering and pain of the common man, a little child, or a simple reaper, or a simple leech gatherer, those who could never become the subject matter of poetry for the classical poets became a matter of great importance for the poets of the Romantic school of thought. William Blake is differently classified as a mystic poet, as a visionary poet, as a precursor of romantic poetry, and also as a romantic poet. As we know, the period of the pre-romantic poetry ranges from 1740 to 1790, and as Blake lived during that period, he belongs to the precursors of romantic poetry also. And as we know that the romantic poetry comes to its near end by the 1830s, and he lived up to 1827. Therefore, we know that he belonged to the romantic school of poets also. William Blake, in this poem, discusses the plight of child labor. Blake had watched the incidents of his time very closely. He was an eyewitness of the London riots of 1780 that were led by the anti-Catholics and who set a big part of London on fire. And he was a close watcher of the French Revolution of 1789. So these things, the clashes that were taking place between the Catholics and the Protestants, between the pro-revolutionaries and the pro-monarchy people in France, and later on when England invaded France after 1789's French Revolution, there was a lot of heated philosophical arguments in the air of England, of Europe, and of the world. And we do not forget that this was the time when America was fighting for its freedom from the British colonial empire, and it got its victory. And America became a free state in 1783, defeating the colonial forces. So, lots of things were going on. And so the people like Blake, who were very sensitive to the surroundings, could not keep themselves aloof. So it is reflected in the poetry that he composed. And in this poem, that has two parts. One part was published in 1789 in his Songs of Innocence, and the other part was published in 1794 in his Songs of Experience. We know these two books were anthologies of poems written by William Blake, and he declared that these two books of songs represent two contradictory states of the human soul. As we find in this poem, in the first part, that is the chimney sweeper, when my mother died, I was very young. That was published in 1789. Blake is not so revolutionary. It is a part of the poem of Songs of Innocence. Therefore, we find in this poem that the poet is trying to console, trying to justify the child labor. And in the next poem that was published in 1794, in his Songs of Experience, he does not leave the king or the priest or the church or the society unpunished or uncriticized. He is very harsh in the second poem in his criticism of all who are the seats of power in society. He is vehemently destroying all those who are the reason behind this child labor. I think before you could enjoy this poem, it would be better to listen to these poems. Let us have a look at the poems first. In the first part of the poem, Chimney Sweeper, when my mother died, I was very young. It is divided into 6 stanzas. When my mother died, I was very young, and my father sold me while yet my tongue could scarcely cry, weep, 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 so your chimneys I sweep, and in soot I sleep. There is little Tom Decker who cried when his head that curled like a lamb's back was shaved. So I said, hush, Tom, never mind it. For when your head is bare, you know that the soot cannot spoil your white hair. And so he was quiet, and that very night, as Tom was a-sleeping, he had such a sight, that thousands of sweepers, Dick, Joe, Ned, and Jack, were all of them locked up in coffins of black. And by came an angel who had a bright key, and he opened the coffins and set them all free. Then down a green plain, leaping, laughing they ran, and washed in a river and shine in the sun. Then naked and white, all their bags left behind, they rise upon clouds and sport in the wind. And the angel told Tom, if he would be a good boy, he would have God for his father and never want joy. And so Tom awoke, and we rose in the dark and got with our bags and our brushes to work. Though the morning was cold, Tom was happy and warm. So if all do their duty, they need not fear harm. Here we find in these 6 stanzas of the poem that the poet is not very harsh, though he is giving this message in the first stanza when he says that the child was sold after his father was dead. And the child was a very small child at that time. He could not even speak out the word sweep, sweep, sweep. So he expresses his helplessness and says that it is the reason that he is sweeping the chimneys of those people who are in power, and he is sleeping in the soot or the dark areas or the darkness of the chimneys. And in the second stanza we find that the poet is consoling Tom Decker, the other child who was being shaved off his curly hair, and Tom was trying to weep, but the poet asks him not to weep, as his curly hair would catch the soot in it and spoil its color. And so he made Tom quiet, and Tom slept that night and had a dream in his sleep, and where he found that there were thousands of sweepers there, and they were all locked up in black coffins. And an angel came and set them all free, and then they were free, enjoying in the green fields, leaping and laughing and running and washing in the river and shining in the sun. Then all those little children left their black bags behind, and they rose upon into the clouds, and they played in the wind and played with the angels, and the angel told Tom to be a good boy. And angel also asked him if he would be a good boy, then he would have God as his father. And after this dream, Tom got up and he became happy. There was darkness, the weather was cold, but he was feeling warm because of that pleasant dream. And the last line of the poem, that so if all do their duty, they need not fear harm, is a reminder that the poet is trying to be pessimistic, trying to be a non-revolutionary, trying to be a conformist. He is not trying to raise a banner of revolt at this cruel system of child labor, when the little children were being sold for money by their greedy fathers after the death of their loving mothers. But the picture is not like this anymore in the next part of the poem, which starts like this. A little black thing among the snow, crying, weep, weep in knots of woe. Where are thy father and mother? Say, they are both gone up to the church to pray. Because I was happy upon the heath, and smiled among the winter's snow, they clothed me in the clothes of death, and taught me to sing the notes of woe. And because I am happy and dance and sing, they think they have done me no injury, and are gone to praise God and his priest and king, who make up a heaven of our misery. We can contrast the last lines of these two parts of the same poem. In the first poem, in the last line, he says, if all do their duty, they need not fear harm. Whereas in the last line of the second poem, he says, who make up a heaven of our misery. Here, the poet is heavily thrashing all those, be it the priest or the king or his cruel parents, who have not been able to understand his misery. He says, he was asked by a question when he was crying in pain, in knots of woe. He was a little black thing among the snow. He was a little child. He was a little child having been blackened by the soot of the black chimneys that he had to clean. And all around him there was snow. So the poet is trying to say that a little boy was living a painful life around those people who were enjoying the wealth and power and prosperity. And he was crying in the knots of woe or in knots of pain and suffering. And someone asks him about the whereabouts of his parents. Where are his parents? He is asked to reply. And he replies that they have both gone to the church to pray. It is a sarcastic remark. There is a sarcasm in it, there is an irony in it, that the child says, because he was not displaying his unhappiness, because he was not expressing his sorrow because he was happy upon the heath and he smiled among the winter snow. In these two lines, the poet is trying to say that the child was displaying happiness in unhappy conditions and is smiling in painful situations, and those insensitive parents did not recognize the hidden suffering and the hidden sorrow of the little child, and so thinking that he was happy upon the heath and smiling in the winter snow, they clothed him in the clothes of death. The clothes of death refer to the blackened dress that those children who had to clean the chimneys of the industrial units during those years, those children were sometimes as young as 3 or 5 years of age, because they could easily slip into the chimneys to clean that. And he says, they taught me to sing the notes of woe. He is blaming his parents that those parents clothed him in the clothes of death and taught him to sing the songs of suffering, songs of pain. And he again says in the last stanza, because he was displaying happiness, because he was dancing and singing in adversity, because he was not showing the signs of protest, those parents thought that they had done no harm to him, and they had gone to praise God and his priest and king. All three words, gods G, priests P, and kings K, has been written in capital to suggest their prominent role in this torture of the little child, who make up a heaven of our misery. He is blaming that they are making his misery a thing of joy for themselves. They are a cause of their exploitation. So we find the Songs of Experience poem, second part of the poem, is very revolutionary. He expresses his deep sympathy for the working little chimney sweepers of his time. We also know that a famous essay is also written by Charles Lamb, who also belonged to the same period. And in his essay also, Charles Lamb attacked this custom of employing little children to clean the chimneys of the industrial units of that time. Thank you.